I'm your instructor for today, your guide, if you will. And we're going to be covering today the trauma section of the basic first aid part of the class. You've got a basic emergency medicine, basic emergency trauma, and then over the next 2 months, we've got the advanced medicine and the advanced trauma. And they're more in-depth fun things. So today we're going to be covering topics like splinting, bleeding control, bandaging, a few environmental things that we didn't cover last time, and I believe that's it for the on the agenda for today. Our quick legal disclaimers that we always do for each class. I'm not a doctor, I'm a paramedic, I'm an instructor, I'm not a healthcare advisor for you. These classes are for information purposes only, so nothing in these classes is to encourage you to not seek proper medical care when needed. Okay, that is not the purpose of these classes. The purpose of these classes is to help educate you about things that you can do while definitive care is coming. That would be 911, doctors, hospitals, nurses, things like that. And in some really rare situations where you're out and you can't get to a doctor, paramedic, hospital, or nurse, and you need to be able to do something until you can. So this will buy you time. And I wanted to refresh the triage stuff that we covered last time. Oop, there we go. Okay, so triage. Do you guys remember what triage stands for? It means to sort. And there's 3 questions you're going to ask yourself whenever you are triaging. And keep in mind, triage is designed for when you have more people than you do people to take care of them, right? If you've got one person who's sick, hurt, or injured, and one person to take care of them, you don't need to triage because you only have one. But if you have 2 people to take care of and only one person, you're going to have to choose who to help first. And so triage can help you do that. The 3 questions you should ask yourself are, what care does this person need? What resources do I have available? And do I have the training and resources to meet their needs? If the answer to the last question is no, then the person is not going to get the care they need. They're probably going to die. Which is why we want you to take these classes so that you can get the information and knowledge you can to take care of as much as you can. Do you guys remember the different categories? Yeah? No? A little bit? Okay, let's kind of go over them real quick. This is kind of the international triage system. They assign 4 colors to all patients. If you've taken a CERT class, this should be kind of familiar. They sort all the casualties into these 4 groups. Red is very seriously ill or injured, and they're about to die. They have a life threat. If we don't take care of them, they will die. And it's fixable, something that we can take care of. Yellow, this is serious. This would be like broken bones, burns that aren't life-threatening. You know, there's different grades of injuries. A broken bone isn't usually going to kill you. I say usually because we'll learn some more about that today with the splinting stuff. This is seriously injured, but they're going to live. They're not going to die today. Green, these are the people that are hurt, but they can walk and talk and do things and usually help out. So as a paramedic, when we had a bus rollover or something where a lot of people got injured, the first thing we would do is say, hey, if you can hear me, we're here to help. Come over here, we'll help you. And anybody who could walk over there to us and ask for help, we green tagged because they're not that serious. Their thinking is okay, their legs work, they're getting enough blood to their brain to where they're not passing out. They're our lowest concern. So we put them over here in one big group and we would use them to help us take care of everybody else. Hurt but can walk and talk and help. And then you have the black tags. These are the people that have a serious life threat. They may not be dead yet, but their needs are more than we can take care of. They may have a pulse. They may even be alive for now, but they're not going to live past the next 15, 20 minutes. And nothing that we can do is going to change that. Or there may be an obvious fatality. You know, they're missing a head, they're missing a lower half of their body, missing an upper half of their body, you know, right or left sides, things like that we can't take care of. So you remember the little mnemonic that I told you guys about, the 30 and 2 can do? Does that sound familiar from last time? Okay, do you remember the decision tree that we went down? How we used it? If you could say, able to walk and talk, come over here, you were a minor injury, you were green. If they weren't breathing, the only intervention we would do is open their airway, tilt their head back with their chin and their forehead, and if they started breathing, we would red tag them, because they're obviously something's going on where they're not being able to breathe on their own. We would red tag them. But if they didn't start breathing, they were a black tag. Don't even bother checking a pulse. It'll make you feel guilty because they probably have a pulse. So don't check it. It'll make you feel bad about moving on to the next person. If their breathing was greater than 30, and that's where that first part of the 30 and 2 can do comes into place. If their breathing is faster than 30 breaths per minute, which is about 1 breath every 2 seconds, red tag them. They're serious. There's something going on. If it's less than that, let's keep going down. Remember to check their blood circulation. And if it's cold, are their fingers going to work? No. So where else can you check? Earlobes. There was one more. Lips. Your lips. Your head gets a pretty good blood supply no matter what happens. So if your lips can turn pink and white, then you got good circulation. As long as it's less than 2 seconds. That's where the 2 comes into play. So now we've got 30, breathing faster than 30 times per minute. Their blood is refilling less than 2 seconds. And if they can do that, we keep going down. We check mental status. Can they follow commands? They may not be sharp on. They may be a little confused. They may be a little disoriented. But if you tell them, hey, come here, hold this, push here, and they can do it, they can follow commands, then they get a yellow tag. Everyone else is red. So it kind of makes it easy to identify which are your serious critical patients. They're either breathing faster than 30 breaths per minute. They're taking longer than 2 seconds for their capillaries to refill, and they can't follow commands. Those are your reds. Everybody else is going to be yellow, green, or black. Is that a good refresher? Let's practice it again. Do you guys remember what this one was? 12-year-old child, 3rd-degree burn to arm, has cuts on their face, arms, and legs. They're crying in pain. They stumble up to you, crying for help. Help me, help me.
Green.
Gray? Green? Green?
Up to you, moving to you.
Okay, moving to you and walking and talking. But aren't burns serious? Yeah. Aren't the cuts to their arms and face and legs and things serious?
Could be.
Could be. But are they going to die right now? And they're doing pretty good because they can walk up to you and ask for help. So you guys are right, they're green. 28-year-old adult lying on the ground, doesn't breathe and doesn't start to breathe when you open his airway. There is a slow pulse on his wrist because you checked it when I told you not to. But he doesn't respond. Black. Why?
He's not going to get better.
He's dead. You need to work on the other people.
Right, he's got problems that are more serious than we can take care of because he's not breathing on his own. Do you live long if you don't breathe?
No.
About how long?
It's relative, right? 2 or 3 minutes.
Average is 3 minutes. Okay. Number 3, 75-year-old adult, chest pain, trouble breathing. He's got a history of 3 heart attacks and bypass surgery. His skin is really pale and sweaty.
Red.
More information.
More information. What do you want to know about him? You're thinking red.
Mobility and speech.
He can talk to you. He's answering your questions, but he's short of breath. I can't breathe. He's breathing like this. I can't breathe.
30 breaths per second.
About 40.
Yeah, that's too high.
That's a red tag.
Red tag? Anybody disagree? Who thinks he's a yellow? He's red. The breathing puts him above the yellow. All right, 8-year-old child, trampled by the crowd. They've got broken arm and a broken leg, bleeding from a cut on their head and face, very confused and crying.
Yellow.
Yellow.
Why?
Serious, but going to bed.
Okay, what about internal bleeding?
Well, we don't have that information as a given, do we?
You don't have a CAT scan in your head? Remember, these are real quick 3-second, 30-second assessments.
And the broken arm is serious, but it's not.
Going to kill them right away. Who's ever broken an arm before? All right. You went to the emergency room and they put you in a splint, and what they tell you?
Go home and take 2 aspirin.
Go home, take some ibuprofen, these Lortabs, and follow up with an orthopedic surgeon when they can fit you in, usually about a week away from there. So you've got at least a week amount of time. A broken bone hurts, but it's not that serious. People survive with that all the time. You just might walk funny the rest of your life. Or be able to scratch your back without having to stretch.
Well, this would be like a compound fracture where, like my son did when he smoked, it'd still be yellow.
Still be yellow. Open, bones sticking out everywhere, still a yellow. Now, if there's blood spurting at the same time, that's a little bit different. Put a tourniquet on, and which we'll learn today, put a tourniquet on and then make them yellow. Because the infection's not going to kill them right now. It'll kill them in a week. We'll take care of that later. All right, remember the sample history questions we asked each other? Yes? Okay, remember how to do that? Okay. Well, that was the last part of that I wanted to review real quick. Because we talked about all of this last time.
We could have a 10 on that. Did those get posted online?
They did.
And this class today will.
This one will as well, yes. All right, so we want to start from this slide. All right. So today's going to begin more about the trauma, injury related things. So let's talk about burns. We'll talk about bleeding. And we'll talk about splinting, which is on the next couple slides. The burns, some misconceptions, and I'd use the myth part on purpose. Because there's a lot of myths about burns, how you take care of them, what you should and shouldn't do. And you're right. But I'm going to ask you questions and see what you know. And probably most of them are going to be myths. And we're going to fix those wrong thoughts. The nice thing about bleeding is that it always stops eventually. Whether you do something or do nothing, it's always going to stop. So be concerned about it, but don't freak out that they're bleeding. It'll stop eventually. Few key points to bleeding control is pressure, your hands. We want you to put your hands on things to apply pressure. Dressings and wraps, and we're not talking gourmet food here. There's a difference between a dressing and a bandage, or what holds the dressing into place. And then there's some tourniquets, some myths and some myth mistakes. And no, I don't have a lisp. I just like myths. There's a lot of things that people think about tourniquets that are just wrong about using them. And then two, when they do use them, they use them the wrong way. So we're going to fix those things for you too. The principles of splinting. I've got some examples on the next slide, a lot of very specific scientific splints that are designed for certain things, certain injuries. However, you're never going to remember all of those. So what I'm going to teach you instead is, we'll teach you those, but I want you to understand the principles behind what you're doing. And as long as you understand the principles of splinting and bleeding control, then it doesn't matter if you get it right, if it looks pretty. As long as it does the job that it needs to do, it's a good splint and it's a good bandage. So The first principle of splinting is to immobilize the bones above and below the break. So for example, if I break my forearm right here, what bones are above the break?
The ulnar radius.
No, the ulna and radius are what's broken.
Well, then your humerus.
The humerus, the bone up here, and then your hand, your metacarpals, and I think it's in your hands, right? Your carpals. Metacarpals are in your feet. Your carpals are in your hands.
And carpals are in your feet, but the metatarsals are in your feet.
Yep.
The metacarpals are in your hand.
So bones above and below. So can I put just a splint right here?
No,
Why not?
because you can still swing your arm.
Because if I can move this bone, it's going to move this bone, which is broken. And we don't want that to happen. So you want to do the whole thing up. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Watch for swelling, cutting off your pulses. So the first thing you want to do, remember how we taught you guys to check a pulse? And that capillary refill? You want to be able to identify that you've got circulation before you start doing a splint. Because along these bones are a bunch of blood vessels and arteries. And if you start trying to apply a splint and you lose circulation, there's stuff we're going to teach you in the advanced class how to fix that. Okay? This class is just going to be immobilizing it. The one in 2 months will teach you how to, we won't teach you how to reduce fractures because only doctors can reduce fractures. But we will teach you how to put it in a neutral inline position to restore circulation, which is code for reduce a fracture. Okay? But we don't reduce fractures. Who does that? What do we do?
Immobilize.
Immobilize it. Tell about-
Neutral inline position to restore circulation. Okay. It doesn't have to be pretty, but it does need to get the job done. So here's some of the really common splints that we're going to cover today. The volar splint. This one's really common for people with carpal tunnel syndrome. You see them walk around with the little splint that goes from their hand down their forearm. This is really good for wrists, broken wrists, and really close proximity forearm fractures. Okay. You got sugar tongue splints, which is good for forearms and elbows. Do you guys remember back in the old days? I forget that I'm in Utah where they don't drink coffee and tea that much. But they had little sugar cubes that you would put in your tea and your coffee. And they had these little pinchers, little tongs to do that. Well, they had a very specific shape. Like this, right? Great big U shape. Well, guess what the sugar tongue splint looks like?
Just like.
Just like that. It's a great big U shape.
He doesn't have the little fingers on it.
Yeah, there's no little grippers right here at the bottom for grabbing the sugar. Okay, but that's where it got its name from. Excellent for forearms, elbows, humerus fractures, to stabilize those. And you got stirrup splints. Who's ridden a horse before? Or at least seen a saddle? What do you put your feet into?
Sure.
And how does that stirrup fit around your foot? Kind of like a U shape.
Yeah.
The stirrup splint's going to be the same thing, but it's designed for your feet and ankles. Sling and swath. This is probably the most common and most highly used one. Anytime you've got, whether you've got any of these other splints on an arm or a shoulder injury, you want to immobilize and take the weight off that injury. So a sling holds the arm with the wrist higher than the elbow. That's a really important part. Not like this, like everybody uses them. Like this. And then it holds it to the body so it can't move. That's what the swath does. And then you have knee immobilizers. Who's got bad knees? All right. Have you ever had the knee brace where they lock it at a certain degree, usually about 21 degrees, and your knee is locked like this? Your knee is immobilized. Yeah, if you've got a knee injury, the same type of splint needs to be applied to take care of it. Some more principles on how to take care of splints and sprains and strains is RICE, R-I-C-E. And you can have cold rice, you can have hot rice. And if you're really lucky, you've got teriyaki to go with it. Cold. When should you apply an ice pack?
At the beginning, right away.
The very beginning. You want to decrease the swelling. So the RICE stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. You want to rest whatever is sprained, strained, or broken. You want to ice it so that it can control the swelling. You want to compress it with an ACE wrap, something that's going to squeeze it. That's also going to keep the swelling down. Swelling and inflammation are going to be your enemies with any of these injuries. The more that happens, the more it's going to hurt, the more you're going to cut off circulation. You want to decrease your swelling. And then elevation. If you can, you want to elevate whatever is injured above the level of the heart. It makes it harder for the heart to pump blood to it. And the less blood we get to it, you guys remember the histamine response from all the allergic reactions last time that caused the swelling, the leaky blood vessels? Any injury is going to have a histamine response too. So can you take Benadryl to help with the swelling for a broken leg?
Yeah, it's an
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to do that. Okay? Anything that's going to stop that histamine inflammation response is going to help. Whether you use the herbal stuff or you use the natural stuff or the commercial stuff from the hospitals.
What's the RICE stand for again?
Rest, ice,
Immobilization.
compression, and elevation. You've already immobilized at this point. This is how you take care of it after.
So it's rest, immobilization,
No,
Ice.
rest, ice.
ice.
If it makes it easier, after the rest comes the ice. Okay? And that's not immigration customs enforcement. Broken bones. All right, there's nothing funny about a broken humerus. The humerus is the name of the bone up here. Again, what is the purpose of splints? Immobilize, immobilize, immobilize. All right, so let's put some of that into practice. I have here a wonderful box of fun things to play with. You guys remember from my last class that I love saran wrap, right? You'll learn to appreciate it in this class. So take a box, every 2 people. Your partner's back there behind you. And today I'm going to introduce you to a type of splint that is my personal favorite, because who likes origami?
I do. I love it. Are you kidding? I can't do it, but I like to see it. Is that like an origami bear?
Close. Never been to Oregon. Well, Oregon does not do origami very well. Origami is a Japanese art of folding paper to make new things out of it. This is a type of splint. The original one was called a SAM splint. I forget what it stood for. But you're looking at this and going, Josh, how in the world is this floppy piece of aluminum, which is all it is, it's really thin grade aluminum with foam padding around it, how is this going to immobilize anybody's broken bones? Nope, you can spiral it all you want, and it's still like a slinky. Any guesses? Who ever played with those slap bracelets when we were kids? They were shaped like a measuring tape, and they were stiff until you hit something with it, and then it curled around it. What made it stiff? Do you remember? Okay, it was concave in the center. Little magic people inside. We're going to do a little physics lesson here. Curved shapes are extremely structurally sound. They take a lot of force in both compression and distraction. Okay, more compression. So if you can curve this shape, you now have something that is rigid. Yeah? Okay. If you curl it into a tube, you have something that's even more rigid and can take a lot of compression. Does that kind of make sense? So that's how you use these, is that you curve them and they become rigid, and now you can do things like splint somebody's forearm. This is a volar splint. It's the first one that we talked about. Okay? And if you bend it back like this, the doctors will be happier.
Okay, what kind of break is that good for?
Wrists. Wrists and close proximity forearm breaks. Because you're immobilizing all the bones in the hand. And if it's the wrist that's broken, you're immobilizing the bones, the ulnar radius, up above it. Put that in a sling with this above the elbow. Good. And your orthopedic surgeons will love you.
Why above the heart?
Because the heart pumps blood to your body, right? And it's harder for the heart to pump blood uphill. So if you put it up here, you'll get less blood going to it. Less blood, less inflammation, less swelling.
But why here instead of down?
Because if you hang it down here, it's below the heart, isn't it? Here it's above the heart.
Why not below the heart?
Because if it's below the heart, it's easier for the heart to pump blood to it. So when you have more blood, more swelling. We don't want swelling.
Okay,
Yeah?
gotcha.
So we want it above the heart. Yeah? Good. Make some for me. Turn to your neighbors. And pretend they've got a broken wrist. Yeah. Now here's a little tip for you. If they've got one broken arm and the other one's okay, it's really easy to form this splint to the one that's not broken. Squish it, form it, shape it just right for their body, and then switch hands.
Is it best to fold it this way first and then do this?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You are only limited by your imagination.
Kind of go like that. I saw a gym teacher when I was in junior high use a magazine under an ace bandage.
Does the same thing.
And I did that for my stepdaughter. And when I went to the emergency room, the doctor unwrapped the ace bandage and saw that magazine and went, ooh.
Nice, creative.
So if this is going to have to go up, why does it have to go up again?
Okay, he asked a good question. Remember how I said earlier, when you do this, you want to try to make it so that the hand isn't hanging down straight like this. You want it kind of backwards so that it's like this. So it makes a question mark. The reason why is that orthopedic surgeons like things what's called the position of function. And whenever you relax your arms, your wrist doesn't go straight. It's actually bent just a little bit. And your hand isn't straight, it's kind of curved. So pretend you're holding a soda or a glass and then tilt it back. And what that does is that actually aligns the bones in the wrist, the way they're supposed to be so that it starts the healing process now. If you do it straight like this, they have to go back in and not re-break it because it's not healed yet, but readjust those bones to this position. So that's why it's important to do that. So pretend they're holding a glass, and their hand should look like they're holding a glass on your splint. However you do it. That make sense? Okay, good.
Where can you buy these?
Anywhere, any medical supply, the internet is full of them.
What do they call?
They got them here.
We've got them here. We have them here at our store. We sell them.
What do they call?
Foam splint.
Orange splints.
Yep. They come in different sizes. They come in 36-inch ones like this one. They come in 24-inch ones, which are a little bit cheaper. They come in little short ones for your fingers and your hands and stuff like that. I usually like to get the bigger ones because you can cut these with a pair of scissors down to whatever size that you need. Or fold them. In fact, they come in rolls like this with a little roll of stretchy elastic vet wrap inside to put it on with. They come folded flat. They call them tactical. They come in black, olive drab green, stuff like that. They charge you more because they're tactical.
This is for deer hunting.
Yeah, this is for deer hunting. Please don't shoot me. I fell and broke my arm. Okay. So the next one is the sugar tongue splint, which you guessed it, is this shape. But how do we make this rigid again? You got to curve it. So one of the best things you can do, may I borrow your arm?
Of course. Oh,
Is take the arm that's not injured, bend the elbow, take this around it, and then squeeze and shape your foam to the arm that is not injured. Okay? And now you have this shape. And you put it around the arm that is injured. And this is really good for forearms because if you come up that elbow just a little bit, you can immobilize the elbow joint too. Okay? So you see it? So actually go up your elbow to where your bottom of your elbow is sticking out. And now this is a great splint for forearms. Yep, because it's the forearm that's broken. So go ahead, put it on somebody. Until you put it on somebody, you don't really know how to do it yet. Remember, what are your principles of splinting? You want to immobilize that break, right?
right.
So do whatever it takes to make that knee not move.
And we can do Clayton's because his is already hurting.
So you would need two of them?
You would need at least 2 to do a knee.
So let's do one together here. Then. Because you need one underneath and one on top. So you're going to put one underneath, form it to the leg, and then one on top. So we'll need both.
If you want to get really fancy, you can go to Home Depot and they sell this wonderful black polyurethane resin impregnated fiberglass wrap that's designed, well, it's not that's what it's designed for. They advertise it for using for holding mufflers together and heat ducting and HVAC. Just like most things, they have a different origin. You guys remember that vet wrap? Ever heard of vet wrap for horses? That wonderful stretchy, self-sticky stuff that they use in medicine now. Started with veterinary stuff.
It's in my first aid kit.
Good. I don't have a problem with that.
What's it for?
It's for wrapping the fetlocks of horses.
Usually I
No,
use
and what's it for in your first aid kit?
Oh, to wrap things.
Oh,
And you don't need tape, it sticks to itself.
It's real light and breathable.
Well, that wonderful little polyurethane impregnated fiberglass, they've been making casts out of it for about 30 years. It's the same thing that doctors use to make those casts on your arms. So you don't need a prescription to buy it. How's that knee coming?
Can't get the saran wrap started.
Hmm?
You said you have to have two.
now you don't want a 40.
Gotta have two.
angle, you want it to lay out a little bit. What's the angle?
Mark
21?
just flexed a little bit.
There, like that. Guess you want to form it to the non-injured leg first.
This is the 9.
Must be like a lot of screaming and yelling. Stuff you told me.
La 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 la.
Like this, right?
I don't know, you tell me. I want you to use the principles how you're going to keep it from moving that knee.
Hey, you said what angle?
The angle doesn't really matter. A slight bend to your knee.
Okay, so you want it so that they can still hobble along on it if they have to?
No, that needs to be bent just a little bit, and I want them not putting weight on it.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't want to move that knee. It needs to be able to not do this. If they can do this, your splint's not working right.
This is how to keep the idiot busy for a half an hour.
Give them a roll of saran wrap.
So are we talking like what type of knee injuries?
Doesn't matter.
Anything? Any?
Sprain, strain, ACL tear, MCL, PCL, whatever you want, a knee injury that you don't want it to move.
Just to immobilize it so it can be dealt with later?
Yep. All right, now straighten it. Yep. That goes back and forth as far as I can tell.
I can move a little bit. So you got like the little circle bend in there.
That helps. That helps a lot. That's not bad. That's better than I was expecting.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Uh-huh. No, I mean, normally when I see people do it like that, totally the wrong way to do it. It's not going to do anything. Now maybe on side to side would be better. Yeah.
Okay, so you're telling
But
me
usually,
side to
but
side.
usually front and back, it just slides and that knee just moves just like this. Oh, now if you did a tube down each side,
Oh yeah, that's better.
this is rigid, isn't it? I mean, that's not going to go anywhere. What if I anchored it here at the ankle and anchored it here at the hip? And then put something underneath that, like my saran wrap roll. And that's, you can't straighten that knee then at all. Try it.
Did you do two on the inside, one on the outside, or just?
One on each. That works too. Like I said, usually as long as it's on the side, usually you get more strength and support out of it than top and bottom. Right around your saran wrap. Gosh darn it, that thing's so freaking useful. I'm surprised I didn't think about that. It's a great idea.
Well, you did think about it, you just didn't verbalize it.
No, I didn't even think about it. I'm doing it by my hands all these years.
That's Jordan.
This is good to know, and I hope I never have to use it.
I hope you never have to use any of the skills that we learn here. But with my luck, being as accident prone as I am, and my kids are, and my friends are, I'll be using this stuff my whole life. There's a reason why I became a paramedic and a firefighter and a remote medical practitioner. Yes, sir.
So if somebody has broken ribs, do you immobilize the arm that's on that side, or do you just wrap them?
Okay, broken ribs, excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. Broken ribs are tough.
Right. If I ever break my leg, I won't have that.
Because when you have ribs, you've got bone. Well, let's use a different color for the bone. Let's use blue for the bone, just because I like blue. So you've got bone, and between it you've got muscles and connective tissue. So if you were to break this rib and you've got muscle above it and below it, it's really painful. But is the rib going to go anywhere? No, it's already splinted. It's already self-splinted to the ribs above and below it. Does that kind of make sense? Now, where this does change and becomes an issue is when you have more than one rib broken in more than one place. So when you've got 2 or more ribs broken in 2 or more places, this whole section right here can move in and out when they breathe. Okay? Because you're going to change the pressure inside and out. So when you've got a broken ribs that are broken 2 or more ribs in 2 or more places, you have what's technically called a flail segment. Have you guys ever heard that before? A flail is an old device, primitive device used to harvest grain. You ever seen nunchucks?
Yep.
That's a flail. That was actually designed and created for the Japanese and Chinese peasants to beat the rice with to knock the kernels off. And then ninjas took it and said, hey, we need a way to have weapons that don't look like weapons. Well, if I hit somebody upside the head with that, that's going to hurt. Probably because they'd hit each other upside the head as they're doing stuff on accident. And they said, oh, that hurts. Hey, let's use that as a weapon. Let's create a technique around it. So the nunchucks are actually a rice harvesting tool. Same thing with your kamas and a lot of other the ninja weapons. Okay, they're all farm implements. Yay, ninjas, right? So a flail is something that flops around back and forth really easy and is not very secure. The same thing's going to happen to those ribs. The muscles are not going to be enough to support it because the ribs next to it are broken too. We used to tell people to take sandbags or something like that and put it on it and wrap it really tight. The problem with that is that if you take something and wrap it really tight around your ribs, are you going to be able to breathe? Difficulty. You can belly breathe without moving your ribs. And if who's ever broken ribs before? That's what you did, isn't it? You didn't want to move your ribs, so you belly breathe.
Not to make you wear a rib belt.
A rib belt?
Yeah.
So now what we've kind of gone to, instead of sandbags, that if you've got a really bad flail segment, you take something soft and light and you put it on it and then wrap it loosely. That's going to keep it from flopping around a lot. but it's still going to do it a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
So how do you know if there are 2 or more ribs broken in 2 or more places? Because I don't carry a pocket x-ray machine. If it just hurts really bad, worse than we just assume it's
The
gonna be-
cool thing about it flopping around when they breathe in and out is that it's going to move when they breathe in and out. So what are you going to do? You're going to take their shirt off or expose that area and watch them breathe. When they breathe in, the ribs are going to expand, but that section is going to suck in. It's going to go opposite what their ribs are doing. And when they breathe out and their ribs collapse, that section is going to pop out. So you'll be able to see a flail segment. And if you put your hands on it gently, you can feel it move in and out as they breathe. That's how you know.
You're saying you wrap it in one of those?
You take one of those, yep, and you wrap it, put it on there and wrap it lightly with saran wrap. Because what does saran wrap do?
Wait, I'm not clear
It
what you're doing.
stretches.
Keeping it in the roll,
Yep, I would even,
soft on it, and then wrapping it.
yes ma'am. In fact, I would even leave it in the packaging. Because all this is doing is keeping it from popping in and out and in and out. And if you take the saran wrap, which stretches, and wrap maybe just 2 wraps around it, that saran wrap is not enough to keep them from breathing, but it is enough to hold this in place and keep that rib from flopping in and out as they breathe, okay? Because that saran wrap is going to stretch and expand as they breathe. Yeah, I would just leave it in the plastic. That way you can reuse it later. All this is just a big, bulky something that's lightweight. On that note, let's transition down to bandages. And we're going to do that by starting with triangle bandages, okay? These are still part of that sling and swath that we were talking about. Oh no. There you go. And you did get a clock, thank you. I appreciate that, Mark. These triangle bandages are really useful because, like the saran wrap, they're a lot stronger than they actually look. Okay.
This cheesecloth?
It's the same type of thing as cheesecloth. Yeah, it's a real loose weave cotton. That's all this is. It's called muslin cotton. A sling. If you're doing it by yourself, don't take the ends and tie a square knot. It actually uses up too much of your fabric. Take the ends and put them together, and then just make a small overhand knot. Okay, it's just as secure as a square knot, but it uses a lot less of your fabric. And you can adjust the height of this by tying a new knot if you need to. It's not a big deal, just tie another one. I want it about right there. Remember, what was the goal with the sling? And
Keep it above the.
keep it above the heart. But this part still hangs down, doesn't it? So I'm going to take and put a knot right here. And make this side even shorter. Well, now my elbow is falling out the backside. Well, gosh darn it. Let's make a pocket. Another knot. See how I did that? Just anywhere you tie a knot, you're going to create a short spot. And that's all it takes. Makes a wonderful sling. It's also really good as a tourniquet. Okay, so now we're going to transition over to bleeding control. Remember how I said tourniquets have a lot of myths and misunderstandings about them? What is a tourniquet supposed to do? What do you guys think a tourniquet supposed to do?
It's supposed to stop the flow of blood through an artery.
Okay. Apply pressure, stop the flow of blood through an artery. Anybody else? Why would you put a tourniquet on somebody?
Keep it from bleeding.
Okay, to control bleeding. That's what I want to focus on. A lot of people think that you have to apply a tourniquet until their pulse goes away. That's not true. You only need to apply a tourniquet until the bleeding goes away. If I can still have a pulse that gets all the way down, I don't lose a limb because I put a tourniquet on. It used to be life or limb, choose which one you want to save if you're putting on a tourniquet. We've been putting tourniquets on people in the emergency rooms and surgical suites and ORs for years and years and years and years for up to 6 to 8 hours. And nobody's lost an arm or a leg yet. We've lost a few heads. So don't ever put a tourniquet around your neck. That's usually bad. But we've never lost an arm or a leg yet from tourniquets being used. So don't be afraid, because even if you have to walk out of some place, usually you can walk out from wherever you are and get help within 6 hours. And if not, well, you're probably going to lose an arm or a leg. But don't be afraid to put tourniquets on.
So the tourniquet, say for example, you have a major vessel bleeding, you use the tourniquet to shut it down.
Yep.
And then you bandage it up and everything. Now there's no real blood flow going to that limb, right?
Depends, yeah.
Okay, so how long can that limb live?
6 to 8 hours at least,
Okay.
before there's any permanent damage.
So, and to extend that, you periodically loosen the...
Well, in all honesty, one thing we teach paramedics now is that it used to be no one can take off a tourniquet but a doctor, and they realized that was stupid. So paramedics can take tourniquets off now. So what I'm going to teach you is the reason we're putting on a tourniquet is to control bleeding, right? So if we apply a tourniquet to control a bleed right here, and I put the tourniquet on, and we tighten it down until the bleeding is controlled, and I can now put a big bandage on here and wait about 10, 15 minutes, a clot is going to form. If I put a pressure bandage on, I can now, after about 20 minutes, slowly loosen off this and see if my bleeding is still controlled. If it's still controlled, take off the tourniquet. Okay? Have a little common sense about it. This whole idea of once it's on, write the time on their forehead and all that. Yes, do that if you don't know what you're doing. But if the purpose we're putting it on is to control bleeding, well then once the bleeding is controlled, take it off.
I have a question about tourniquet use.
Sure.
If the blood is just seeping,
Don't need it.
don't need a tourniquet.
And that's we're about to cover the first principle of bleeding control is pressure. Remember that from the slides? Pressure. Direct pressure is your number one method of controlling bleeding, even arterial bleeds. I had patients that were blown up with IEDs and bombs in Afghanistan and Iraq. Arterial bleeds. So what did I do? I took a couple of these, I put it on the artery, and I put my knee on it and knelt on it while I'm taking care of other things. Usually by the time I was finished taking care of other things, when I took my knee off of that, the blood had stopped spurting. A clot had formed. Direct pressure will control arterial bleeds. It just takes time and clotting. This is a wonderful sponge that sucks all the water out of the blood, and like a cheesecloth, it gets most of the solid parts of blood, the cells, the clot, starts to form in here really fast. So this becomes one giant blood clot. And if you can secure this on a spurting arterial bleed, it'll stop it. Plain and simple. But it takes time.
Okay, I'm thinking of a scenario where it's gonna be a long time before you can get this person
Mhm.
to help.
Sure.
And it has arterial bleeding and it does stop. How reliable is that clotting gonna be, towards the healing process?
Extremely reliable. That's exactly what needs to happen.
Okay.
You gotta wrap it with saran wrap though.
Yep.
What's this called?
This is called Curlex.
And that's its purpose to stay rolled up like that?
No, it comes unrolled.
Oh, so,
Yeah. But, and this is a name brand. If you just check it, roll gauze. Roll gauze. So for example, let's say
Bandage that you, in a pinch, you could use one of these.
you could use a t-shirt if you have to, guys. Sterility is not an issue here. It does not need to be sterile. Infection is what kills you days and weeks later. Losing blood will kill you in minutes if you don't take care of it. So what I would do is I would take a roll of this stuff and I would make 2 rolls. Okay? There's a wonderful bandage already pre-made like this called a blood stopper, where it has 2 rolls just like this already commercially made. I'm going to steal your arm for a second, and I'm going to put this on whatever's bleeding, whether it's oozing blood or spurting blood, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to hold pressure. I'm going to count to 300. Do you know how long 300 is? 5 minutes.
So are you putting this part right on the wound?
Yep, right on the wound, and I'm just pushing down as hard as I can.
Okay.
Okay? After 5 minutes, I'm not going to pull this off to see if the bleeding has stopped. Because this is my blood clot, right? If I pull this off, there's no longer a blood clot. Direct pressure, and into 5 minutes, I'm going to take the rest of that roll, and I'm going to wrap it around it. Remember how earlier on the slide I said dressings and wraps? And we weren't talking gourmet sandwiches?
Leave that on when I scare my wife when I get home.
A dressing goes up against the skin, the wound. Okay? So that first roll was the dressing. The bandage or the wrap is the part that holds that dressing in place.
Or as a substitute, you could use the roll of gauze and some vet wrap.
Or vet wrap,
Saran wrap.
or saran wrap, or duct tape, or paracord,
Tie wrap.
or whatever you want. Zip ties, whatever it takes to hold that in place is your bandage. The part that goes up against the skin and the wound is your dressing.
And what are those double bandages called?
Blood stoppers. It's a good name for them, right? And if you just put blood stopper bandage into any type of search engine, they'll pop up. The Israelis, on the other hand, got the bright idea to incorporate it all into one. Gosh dang Israelis.
They have a lot of experience.
They have a lot of experience with wound care. This is a type of bandage. It's called the Israeli combat bandage. Okay, it's been around for about 60 years. And a lot of companies have tried to improve on it, make it better, and all they really do is just copy it and change it a little bit. This bandage and dressing is all in one combined. Okay? This part is the dressing. This is what goes against the bleeding part. And the rest of it is a stretchy ace wrap, but not super tight like an ace wrap, but it is stretchy. So you can apply pressure. And because one thing that happens all the time is that your roll comes loose and falls on the ground and rolls out, they sewed it together. But with really light thread so that you can tear it. So now, steal your other arm, I can take this and hold pressure for how long?
5 minutes.
300 seconds or 5 minutes. And now, when I'm done with that, I'm going to take this, and this piece of plastic right here acts as a lever, and it holds pressure down on it. So I'm going to take this and weave it through. There's a little opening in it, and pull it just as tight as I can. And then when I pull this down, it folds over and puts this edge down against his arm. Can you feel it? Mm-hmm. And then you're just going to wrap it. Not too tight. What do we not want to create here on accident?
A tourniquet.
A tourniquet. We do want circulation going down. The more wraps you put on here, the tighter and tighter this is going to get. And it has these little plastic hooks so that you can hook it onto something. No tape needed. Everything you need is included in that dressing and bandage. These are extremely well priced. They're about $4 or $5 a piece. They come in different sizes, 4-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch ones. Super vacuum packed, so they're tiny and small. They look like this in the packaging. Okay? Super. One per bag. Super, super good bandages if you need them. Israeli bandage. When it comes to tourniquets, this is probably the most popular tourniquet. It's called the CAT tourniquet. It stands for Combat Application Tourniquet. Remember how I said we can make them out of triangle bandages? You can make them out of t-shirts. Not so much belts, unless you got a 2-inch wide belt. Okay? It's hard to get them to tighten down right. You can make them out of this gauze that we use for our dressings. The way these work is that they're Velcroed with a buckle that slides back and forth. And in your first aid kit, you should always have it open as far as it can go. This is so that if you have to apply it to yourself on a leg, you can. And you want to get as high up in here as you can. And then you take that little tab and tighten it just as tight as you can.
If you're not crying, it's not tight.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I don't know how many times I had guys go, "Oh, doc, that's too tight. It's too tight. It hurts." I'm like, "Good. Let's go a little tighter." And you tighten it. And again, you tighten it. And you twist this. And it's going to hurt. If it's applied correctly, it hurts. But what is our goal here? Is it to cut off circulation? To control bleeding. Once that bleeding has slowed down to the point where you can control it with direct pressure, just take this and lock it into the little clips right here. And you're done. It's hard to walk on though. Because as your muscles expand, it tightens down more. There's another one called the TK4. That's just, all it is 2-inch wide elastic with hooks on the end. That one's my favorite because it stretches. And when I used it with SWAT teams and military operations, you can put it on and the muscles can still tighten up underneath.
Is that the rat style tourniquet?
Nope. It's called TK4. The rat style is a rapid application tourniquet. It's the same thing as the CAT, the soft T, anything with a windlass. This piece right here is the same concept. They're all the same. They're just a little bit different. You can make exactly the same thing with a piece of t-shirt and a pen or a stick. But this is a commercial tourniquet. They're very nice, except they're 1.5 inches wide. They should be 2 inches. I don't know why. I don't know why they make these. All the research says that if you go less than 2 inches and you tighten it that tight, you're actually damaging the tissues underneath it. So at least 2 inches wide. A blood pressure cuff, if you have access to one of those, the perfect tourniquet. They're 6 inches wide. You can pump it up just enough until your bleeding is controlled, and you know how much pressure is in it. Ideal tourniquet. That's what we use in the ORs all the time, is blood pressure cuffs. Your goal with the tourniquet, though, is to do what?
Control the bleeding.
Control the bleeding. Can you take it off?
Yes, if the bleeding is
Yes. You put it on, you can take it off. Okay? So if you go to take it off and the bleeding's not controlled, what do?
tighten it up again.
Tighten it back up again. Is there a point in time where it's been on so long that you don't want to take it off? Yes. After about half an hour, I wouldn't recommend taking it off. And here's the reason why. In that half hour, the blood has been getting toxic. And if you take a tourniquet off that's been holding a bunch of toxic blood in one spot, and that now comes back into your circulation in your body, it can cause the heart to stop. So after about half an hour to an hour, I wouldn't recommend taking off a tourniquet. But 15, 20 minutes, absolutely. Okay, half an hour, absolutely. You should be able to control bleeding in that amount of time. So loosen that tourniquet. See if your bleeding is still controlled. That's one reason why I love the saran wrap so much. If I've got a clear saran wrap dressing on top of this bandage, I can see through it. Right? So when I go to release the tourniquet that's up here, I can see if more blood is coming out. And the saran wrap keeps this from getting dirty, and it applies more pressure to it. So again, principles are what I want you to learn, not specific bandages. Does that kind of make sense? So what is your first principle with bleeding control?
Pressure.
Pressure, stop it, okay? If it's spurting, do you apply pressure?
Yes.
Yeah. If it's just oozing and flowing, can you apply pressure?
Yes.
If it's just glistening, apply pressure, okay? Pressure, pressure, pressure. How long of pressure?
Until it stops.
Until it stops. 5 minutes or count to 300. It's going to be about the same. Do you ever peel anything off to look at it?
No.
Why not?
Because you'll rip off the white.
Rip off your clot and you're starting from square one all over again. Okay? Can you add more stuff on top of it?
Yes.
Yes. What happens if you can't get the bleeding to stop with direct pressure?
Use the tourniquet.
Use your tourniquets. Don't be afraid to use your tourniquets. We used to teach elevation and pressure points and all kinds of garbage. If you can't control it with direct pressure in 5 minutes, put on a tourniquet. If you look at it and go, yeah, I'm not going to control that in 5 minutes, put on a tourniquet. Don't be afraid of tourniquets. People were afraid of them for years and years and years. Don't be afraid of tourniquets.
For years, they used to say, don't use one, period.
At first, they were the best thing since sliced bread. Then they said, oh, don't use them. You're losing limbs. No, they weren't losing limbs. It's an urban legend. Okay? And then they came back into favor again. Now they're back in favor. Anything, if used incorrectly, is bad. Anything used correctly is good. So the important thing here is education, which is why we're holding these kind of classes. Anybody want to try putting this on somebody? Turn to your neighbor. The only place I don't recommend you place a tourniquet is around the neck. Okay? Anywhere else, it's fair game. But they work better on arms and legs.
It's not necessary to peel back any clothing, is it?
Put it right on top of it.
Tourniquet right over.
Yep, right over it.
What's bleeding?
Pick a spot. Now, because there is that chance of toxicity of the blood, you want to put the tourniquet as close to the wound as you can without being right on top of it. So usually about 2 inches away from wherever they're bleeding. So if I'm bleeding, spurting blood from right here and I can't control it, I'm going to put it right above it. You want to try to avoid putting them on joints because they move. And there are a lot of bones and they have a lot of arteries going through them and you're not going to get good pressure.
Okay, but you put that tourniquet on right at the groin,
I did.
and why was that? Because it was just above the knee.
Because in combat police operations, you want as much functionality and motion as you can and control the bleeding. So they put them way up here in the groin, way up here in the armpits. Even though the cut's way down here. It's just, it's a bad idea, but it's what we do. Your goal with the tourniquet is that you've got skin. You've got bone. And you have arteries. And you've got veins. It's kind of a fun cross section. Your goal here is to squeeze the outside all the way around to the point to where whatever is bleeding, whether it's arteries or veins, doesn't matter. But you want to decrease this circumference until it squishes all of them closed. That's all you're doing with the tourniquet. Is you're just squeezing all the way around at once until the blood flow decreases to where you can control the bleeding. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Capiche? And we've got about 15 minutes. So I want each of you to improvise a tourniquet out of that triangle bandage that I gave you. Okay? Go down around it, come underneath it, and then come back up and then tie your knot. So 2 fingers under your knot, make that knot as tight as you can get it with your 2 fingers in it. Okay?
We're doing a knot.
Yes. So it's already a pretty tight dressing. And then you take anything, markers, pencils, sticks, twigs, anything, put it in it, and it won't take more than about 1 or 2 turns. Woo! I can already see his eyeballs starting to pop out.
I got something, but use that combat pen over there, the tactical pen. That'll really work great.
Yep, I'm just going to put it right here.
Okay.
And the last thing is, how do you secure this so that the pen, stick, or whatever doesn't come unwound? You can saran wrap it, or there's another easy way. Stand up with me, if you will. You get to where everybody can see this. Once you have your ends, you have these long tails from your knot, right? Wrap them around the ends, and then tie them in a knot on the backside.
Like clothes.
Okay? That will keep this from coming unwound. Yeah? I've been hanging around Bruce too much. He's one of our electrical engineers at work. He's German and has lived in Sweden for the last, 20, 30 years. And he says, yeah, all the time. So now I'm starting to pick up his verbal tics.
It works in both countries, huh?
It does, doesn't it? So let's review real quick. What are your principles of splinting? Your first principle is
Immobilize above and below the break.
immobilize above and below the break. Second principle is circulation. Watch out for swelling. Don't make your splints and things wrapped so tight that you cut off circulation. And 3 was it doesn't have to be pretty. As long as it gets the job done, it's done. Your first principle of bandaging is pressure. If pressure doesn't work, what do you use?
Tourniquet.
Tourniquets. And the last one is, does it have to be pretty?
No.
No. I don't care what your bandage looks like. As long as it works, it works. Any questions about splinting and bleeding control? All right. Stop me if we talked about these last time. Did we talk about these last time? I kind of restructured my slides. We talked about heat and cold exposures, I know for sure. We talked about snake bites and things. Did we talk about the rules of 3?
Yes.
3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without love, and 3 months without love.
3 days without love. Depending on your age.
Depending on your age. Okay. We talked about Giardia and cryptosporidia. Do you guys remember or not? Well, we've got 10 minutes. You want to cover it real quick? Sure. Okay, waterborne illnesses. One of the other environmental issues that's going to be a problem if there ever is a disaster is water. Because how long can you survive without water?
3 days.
3 days. And you will be surprised at what you're willing to drink after 3 days. Or shoot, even after 1 or 2 days without water. I've done stuff out in the desert and out in the swamps and things like that where we're doing survival courses. And I can tell you there is stuff that I would never drink ever that I was slurping up like crazy because I was that thirsty. Nasty, dirty, scummy, oil-covered, thick, mucky water because I was that thirsty. So when you drink water like that, the chances are you're going to be exposed to 2 wonderful little friends that inhabit this wonderful planet with us that are protozoas, are Giardia and cryptosporidia. Okay? These little friends are anywhere in the water where people and animals poop. Not even near the water, but somewhere in the area. So anything coming off that wonderful clear mountain stream that's that pure snow runoff is not pure snow runoff. Okay? It's pure snow deer urine. Okay? So be careful drinking it. If you're not used, yes sir?
I've read that there's just basically no place free of it anymore.
There's no place for it. There are swimming pools in towns that are infested with Giardia. Because what do people do in the pool? Okay? I would never drink pool water if I could avoid it. Because I know what goes on in a pool, because I've done it. Okay? If you haven't done it, you're lying to yourself. Unless you took a sterilizing bath before you went in there, you took something into that water with you. The other thing is bacterial infections and contaminations in the water. Most commonly is E. coli. All right, this is a bacteria that lives inside your gut and your stomach and your intestines that helps you make vitamins and nutrients from the food you eat. It also makes you sick if you drink it in your water supply because now my bugs that are tailored for my body are in your body and they don't like your body. And your body doesn't like them. There are viruses like hepatitis A, which again is another fecal, oral, transmitted virus. And then there's just gunk in it. Pesticides, petroleum products, oil runoff from the roads, fertilizer, car exhaust, all kinds of fun things. But to prove that, a water purifier that I've got was really reliable. I drank from the irrigation ditches that run here in Cedar out of it to prove to my wife that it would be safe and it would taste good afterwards. And it did. It was totally safe, totally fine. I didn't get sick. But if you've seen the irrigation runoff water in these ditches, I mean, it's scary. But you can do it. So you can make bad water safe. However, if you happen to not make it safe enough for you, and by the way, boiling is a wonderful idea. Just keep in mind that water boils at different temperatures with different elevations. The higher in elevation you go, the lower in temperature it'll boil. So up here at about 5,000, 6,000 feet, get your water to a boil, and then keep boiling it for a minute. It's not the same as boiling water at sea level. Okay? If you're up on the mountains, 5 minutes of rolling boil. Because the water temperature is not reaching as high as you think it is. It's not reaching 212 degrees. It's reaching about 150, 140, 130 degrees. And that's not always enough to make it safe.
So the Wappy idea is a lie, basically?
No, the Wappy is a wonderful little tool and device.
It melts the stuff like 180 or something like that.
180 for sustained a long time is anything over 140 for 5 minutes is fine. That's why I said if you're going to get it to boil, boil it 5 minutes.
Because I've heard, tell me if this is true, I've heard that as far as energy to boil water,
Uh-huh.
that you use more energy to get the water up to 10 degrees below boiling as the last 10 degrees of heat. Does that sound right to you?
Yes. Yeah, you're talking about calories now. The amount of energy it takes to raise 1 cubic centimeter of water 1 degree. Yes, it takes a lot more energy to go that last little bit.
So if you're over 140, you got 5 minutes, you're okay. So if you're way up above that.
You're better off. You're not 100% guaranteed. Because keep in mind, that's enough for your E. coli, but not necessarily your Giardia and Cryptosporidium. The higher the temperature you can get it, the better. In fact, if you can cover it with a lid, that'll increase the pressure, and it's even better. And because you're containing all the steam inside, and that's what hospitals use to sterilize their instruments, is hot steam. It's actually better than anything else. But the device he talked about, it's called the Wappy. And what it is a little cylinder with wax and a ball in it. And the wax is a special type of high temperature wax chemical solution that it only melts at about 140, 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And once that wax melts, the ball can move around and shift back and forth. And it's a great way to see if the water that you're drinking has gotten to a high enough temperature for long enough to see if it's safe to drink. It's a very small device. We used to have one in here on a solar oven that we had in here, so we could demonstrate it for people. Great little device. You just put it in your water bottle, whatever, and you put it in the fire and let it boil away. And when you pull it out, you go, oh, nope, not done yet. Yeah, put it back in. Great little device for seeing if your water is safer than it was to begin with.
What do you think of the steam distillers?
Steam distillation is 100% bulletproof. If you are heating it up to a steam, you're killing everything in it,
Right.
and then it's recondensing. That is distilled water.
Right.
That's pure hydrogen and oxygen and nothing else. It'll taste like flat. Doesn't taste very good.
So I have a question. 'Cause
Sure.
We have a big steam distiller. I had one healthcare professional tell me it was dangerous because it's stripping all the minerals out and you need to put back in. Then I have another
Not dangerous.
say that it only strips the bad things, that it's a good thing to drink it. So would you add minerals back in?
I would definitely add minerals back in because our bodies need trace minerals. And distilled water is nothing but hydrogen and oxygen. By virtue, that's all it is. Because you are separating the hydrogen and oxygen and then you're putting them back together in the steam. You are leaving behind all the calcium, the sodium, the potassium, the magnesium, the iron, all of your trace elements, copper, arsenic, everything, the good and the bad. And it's going to taste flat. So if you add some of those minerals back into it, it'll taste a lot better. Yes, sir?
You add minerals back to the water.
How would you do it? Buy a mineral concentrate. On our health and med website, we've got one called Concentrace. It is almost the ideal perfect balance of minerals and trace elements that is designed to go into your water to drink and things like that. It's a wonderful way to do it. And it comes in small little eyedroppers that you can put in a backpack and take with you.
And for those people who have a jacuzzi or a pool and think they're going to drink that water when times get rough, the distiller is really the only way that that water can be purified to make it.
No,
safe?
there are other ways.
Because I understood that like the filters, like the big Berkeys and stuff, wouldn't take
Okay.
enough to get it. where
You're right, they don't. And that's the next point that I want to make here with the waterborne stuff, is that there is a difference between filtered and purified. Okay? Filtered just means that you've taken out the big stuff. The dirt, the leaves, big bacteria, chemicals with a carbon filter. Different types of filters do different things. There are ceramic filters like the Berkeys that usually go down to, it's either 1 or 2 micron. I can't remember what it is. What's that?
1.
It's 1 micron, okay? And that will get your big stuff, some of your big things, not even your Giardium cryptosporidium, dirt, stuff like that. Microns are very, very small. No, that's all your carbon filters. Get out lead, mercury, petroleums, all your heavy metals and stuff. You your carbon filters. The ceramic filters just filter out the big stuff. To get down to where you're getting the Giardia cryptosporidium and the E. coli, you need to be at least half that. And to get the hepatitis A, 1/10 of that for viruses.
The cellular filter, they say they get down to 0.0. They get everything.
That's not true. The solars don't get viruses.
Well, it depends on which one.
It does depend on which
The
one.
one that they sell doesn't.
You're right. The little small micro one, yeah, it doesn't.
They're smaller.
And I love the Sawyers. The water filter he's talking about, it's called a Sawyer Mini.
SAWYER.
Yep. I love it. It's a great one. I have taken it and used it on some nasty water, but I wasn't worried about the viruses in it, like cholera.
Viruses are rare, isn't that?
What's that? They're extremely rare. Yeah, unless you've got obvious fecal contamination in it, I wouldn't worry about viruses. This is just fine. The 0.5. The 0.1s and the 0.01 filters are extremely expensive, but they do an excellent job of purifying the water. A great priced one is the Sagan water filters. They have an iodine coating on the inside of the filters, which will take care of the viruses too. But I believe they only go down to 0.5 microns on their filtration. But the iodine coating takes care of it. Katadyn, Sawyer, Sagan, all these different types of filters out there that say they get viruses. It's usually iodine based. Can you see a problem with that? If you're allergic to iodine, it's a problem. So what is the best way to process your water? At least 2 methods. Filter it and boil it, filter it and iodine it, filter it and bleach it, filter it and do something with it. But filtration is not just enough. Filtration removes a lot of the gunk out of it. The boiling, the iodine, the bleach, whatever you want to put into it to kill the bacteria will purify it. There are some really good, super nice water purifiers that are reasonably priced that have that 0.01 micron filtration. That will get everything out, and you get just water with all the trace minerals in it, but without the motor oil and gas exhaust and stuff in it.
So what are the brands that get down to the 0?
I don't remember because they're too expensive for me. I'm cheap.
So they're real.
I figure I've got to die someday. And I make a regular habit of drinking nasty contaminated water so that my body can handle the Giardia and cryptosporidium. Because if you don't get used to it, those people in Mexico drink their water all the time, right? And they don't get raging diarrhea. So why do we? We're too clean.
The Indians died when the white people came to North America.
Yeah,
But they come out here, they get diarrhea.
they sure do. Why?
It's different.
It's all the gunk, it's all the fluorine and chlorine and crap that we put in our water that makes them sick. Our clean water makes them sick. And their dirty water makes us sick. It's just because we're not used to it. So what are you going to have when you get these poisonings? You're going to have flu-like symptoms with watery diarrhea, not just loose, chunky stuff. It's going to come out like water, maybe a brown or green tinged water. And that's all it's going to be. You will have abdominal cramps, not just discomfort. It's bad cramping. Ladies, your monthly, not even close to the cramping you're going to get with this. All right, who's ever held a fart in way too long? You're laughing because you know what I'm talking about. You're just like, oh, I can't let that out here. It'd be embarrassing. And it gurgles and gurgles and gurgles. And yeah, it's going to be that kind of cramping feeling. It's really bad. Bloating and flatulence. That's the gas. It'll be, and a lot of times that watery diarrhea is going to be frothy and foamy when it comes out. That's how you know that you've got a waterborne contamination. It's more than just food poisoning. What do you do for it? I'm glad you asked. Fluids, 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 fluids. Oh, wait a minute. If I don't have a good source of water and I'm drinking bad water and getting these bugs, you're saying what I need the most is good, clean water? If I had that to begin with, I wouldn't be in this situation. So do what you can. It is better to keep drinking the bad water to get some water in to replace the stuff that you're losing than to not drink it because it's bad.
Do you ever adapt to it?
You will eventually adapt to it.
How long does that take?
Hopefully before you die. Okay? But you can do things like called the Brady diet. This is a diet of things that, yeah, Mark's on it today. These are really easily absorbed foods and nutrients that will sustain life until your gut can rebalance itself. It stands for bananas, rice, applesauce, toast, and yogurt. Okay? Really easy things to eat and digest. They give your gut a chance to relax. The yogurt actually contains, try to get a live, active yogurt. It contains some of the bacteria that are already in your gut to help replenish what's been lost or been thrown off from whatever you've had growing down there. Because a lot of the times, this Giardia, cryptosporidium, and E. coli, the reason you're getting diarrhea is because they don't belong there, and they're growing there, and it's throwing off the balance of the bacteria and fungus that should be growing there. So you're getting diarrhea.
What's the tea?
Toast.
Toast.
Bananas, rice, applesauce or pear sauce or any kind of fruit sauce, toast, and yogurt. The next thing you can do is an over-the-counter medication called loperamide or Imodium. Okay? This is the proverbial cork. If you need it to stop, this will stop it. But it has its own complications, so be careful with it. Some things that are just as effective but not quite so harsh on your body are things like raspberry leaf tea. Anything with a high tannic acid content in the tea. Stinging nettle tea. Those will help address the diarrhea. To help fight the Giardia and cryptosporidium, you're going to take a mixture of colloidal silver with rosemary and oregano essential oils in it. And I'm not talking a lot because normally essential oils are not designed to be taken internally. So they need to be diluted. And the more you can dilute it, the better. I would do either essential oils or better yet, a tincture of rosemary and oregano. A tincture is where they take the same herbs and put them in alcohol and absorb it that way. That will actually help kill the Giardia and cryptosporidium. but it has to come in direct contact with them. The colloidal silver does. That's why it's growing in your gut, so it's a good thing you're going to eat it and drink it. For the essential oils, I wouldn't do more than 1 drop of each oil. Just 1 drop in an 8-ounce glass. That's it. Do it 3-4 times a day until the diarrhea stops. If you want to combine it and make your raspberry and stinging nettle tea out of the colloidal silver and then add the rosemary and oregano to it, it's even better. They all work together great. As a last resort, there are 2 antibiotics that the doctors are going to prescribe for Giardia and Cryptosporidium poisonings, and E. coli both, is Cipro and Flagyl. We're going to talk about in the next class is that yes, these are available without a prescription if you need to. However, they are not marketed for human consumption. They are made in the same labs, but they can't sell them to the public and tell you that it's safe to take them. It is safe to take them. However, it is not safe to take them in the wrong dosages and at the wrong times. So we will talk more about the right dosages and the right times in the next class. But the best thing is to get to a doctor and get a prescription for them. That would be a last resort. We talked about heat exposures. Oh, dehydration, overhydration. Are you guys okay with that one? Okay. And we talked about, I added some pictures since the last time we had this class. So let's talk about the spiders and stuff again real quick. Last time you guys were like, how do you tell them what they look like? Well, that's what they look like. The black widow spider, the female of the species, has a red hourglass on her belly. So good luck flipping her over and looking at her belly to see if she's a black widow or not. Males don't.
They're not even black, are they?
They're shiny black.
They're grayish, charcoal grayish, yeah. They're not even really black. They're kind of a grayish, brownish color. And they are shiny though. But a really easy way to tell a black widow is this giant, enormous abdomen on the back. They are enormous. So.
I don't see the guitar or whatever on the.
All right, here's the neck, and here's the body of the fiddle.
Oh, there.
Okay? The brown recluse is always said to have a cello or a fiddle or a guitar on it. And so here you go. Here's the head, here's the neck, and then here's the body of the instrument.
I was looking on the abdomen. Okay, yeah.
It's actually located on the head, on the thorax part of it. Early stages of that bite is going to look like a bee sting, and then it's going to form a pimple right here in the center. Here's one where the pimple is popped. Once the pimple pops, there's going to be a black dot in the center. And within hours to days, it will grow from that tiny little black dot to forming blisters and dead tissue and gaping holes. This person actually had to have 2 surgeries to remove this black charred stuff. It's called eschar. It looks like a bad burn. What it really is just dead tissue. 2 surgeries, but the things about spider bites is they take for a long time to heal. It's a really long time. Here it is, almost 2 months, and it's still there. After the surgeries. So brown recluse is not something to play around with, and the only way to stop it is to have it surgically removed. And when I say surgically, I don't mean with a surgeon. I mean you take a sharp instrument and you cut it out. So if you are someplace where you don't have access to a doctor, no matter what you do, you need to cut this out.
Pray you have a sharp pair of scissors.
You mean cut out when it's that pimple stage with the black?
I would cut it out as soon as I recognize, oh, this is a brown recluse, it's got a black pimple, it's getting bigger. I would reach in my pocket and pull out a sharp knife or even better, those little, no, these, okay? Those little break-off snap razors. I've always got a cutting something on me. These are the best scalpels that you can almost buy. Because it gets dull, you break it off, you got to sharpen new edge again. I would cut it out with something like this.
If you go back to the prior you're cutting up that one here, on the left one.
Yep.
Now you said like you cut around a quarter inch around the rib. You wouldn't cut around that one. You're talking about the later stage, right?
Oh. I would start cutting right here.
Oh, okay.
If that's going to be like a normal bee sting, it's going to be about the size of your finger. If you're not taking out at least this size around that,
How deep?
that deep. So whatever that radius, so 1.5 inches deep. Because it's not going along the surface of the skin, it's going at 360 degrees. So most people that I have seen that have been bitten by a brown recluse have a hole, a cavity in their arm or leg wherever they've been bitten because they had to cut it out. Life or limb. This really is a life or limb situation. If left untreated, you can die from a brown recluse bite. It will just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating until you die. You need to stop it. There are a few things that you can do besides surgery. The thing about the spider bite from a brown recluse is that it's usually very painless. You don't know you've been bitten until you see the pimple and it starts to swell and starts to hurt from that. And it will rapidly grow and the pimple turns black and pops. Again, the treatment is focused on stopping the spread of the tissue death, and gangrene is a big concern with this. Black widow spiders, on the other hand, usually leave 2 little fang marks. Okay? And it will blister, and theirs is not usually fatal, but it can be depending on the size of the person. Small people, it's more dangerous for. Older people, it's more dangerous for. It affects your heart. It can give you an irregular heartbeat and can actually, basically stop your heart if it's not taken care of correctly. There is an anti-venom for black widows, and there's an herbal one that we can do here in a little bit for all of them that we'll talk about in a second. However, it is immediately painful. When you get bit by a black widow, you know it because it hurts right then. Muscle cramps, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, irregular heartbeat. The antivenoms are available. They're not too expensive, but a lot of the times the pain is so bad that even narcotics, morphine, don't relieve the pain and the muscle cramps. But very few deaths occur from it. You don't really die from it. Again, it depends on the size. A small child, the elderly, yeah, you have an increased chance of dying from it, but it's usually not fatal. It just makes you really sick and really miserable for a long time until you get rid of it. Scorpions. Which one do you think is more dangerous?
The smaller ones, right one.
Yep, the one on this side over here. Why?
Smaller pinchers, even the tail.
Yep. The bigger their pinchers are, the more they use their pinchers to kill their food and eat it. The smaller their pinchers are, the more they use their poison to kill and eat it. So it's the little guys you got to watch out for. Yeah.
So is it that their poison is less deadly, or is it just that that's their first resort is to use their claws?
It's actually less deadly too. There is only one type of scorpion in the continental United States, North America, that has a poison that is toxic enough to actually possibly kill you. And that is the bark scorpion over here on this side. All of the rest of them, their stings feel like a bee sting. It's not that bad. Even ones with small pinchers, it's like a bad bee sting. But the bark scorpion, this one, and you can tell it because it's got the length of the tail is almost the same length, if not longer, than the length from here to the end of their pinchers. And it's all really thin. They have really thin pinchers, and they have this very distinctive pattern on their back where it's shades of dark brown in a pattern like tree bark. In fact, from what I understand, the male of the species, this area is darker brown, almost black. Most of them feel like bee stings. The bark scorpions are in Utah. They started out in Arizona. They've migrated up here. The good news is that they're not aggressive. And as long as you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. But if you step on one or roll over in one when you're sleeping, or put your shoes into or feet into your shoes without knocking them out first, you might get stung. And you'll know pretty quick because it's pretty painful. Talk over these really quick. This is a wasp. Notice how the stinger is really long and thin. And it will actually, it's retractable. They can stick it out and pull it back in and sting you multiple times with that stinger. A bee, on the other hand, it's pretty short and it's barbed all along this edge. So when they sting you, it pulls all of this stuff out of their body. Parts of their intestinal tract, lower abdomen from the bee, and the venom sac. And it looks like that when it's stuck into your skin. What most people do that is wrong is get a pair of tweezers and grab this to pull it out. If you grab this venom sac, what do you think is going to happen?
Inject venom into you.
They're going to squeeze more venom into you. So what you do want to do is get some sort of sharp, semi-sharp edged object, a pocket knife, a credit card, spoons, forks, something, and rake it along the skin until it catches the bottom side of this, and it'll pull it out. But don't use your fingernails, don't use tweezers. You're just going to make it worse. Snakes, my personal favorites. I love these. You've got pit vipers. These guys on this side. They actually have retractable fangs. They fold up into their mouth, and they're hollow. But most snake bites are dry, which means no venom was injected. The young snakes are an exception. They don't know to control their venom, so when they bite you, they give you all they've got. But an adult snake is actually less dangerous to be bit by because they usually won't inject venom into you. And you can tell the difference between a pit viper and a non-pit viper, which is not a poisonous snake, by the shape of their heads. It's that triangular arrow shaped, whereas these are kind of more rounded. Their pupils are round. Of course, if you're getting close enough to a snake to look at its eyeballs, I don't know. But after you kill it, look at its eyeballs. All right? If they're round, you're safe, you're fine. If they're slit, or like a cat's eyes, probably a pit viper. Be careful playing with these things when they're dead. They can still bite you and inject poison after they're dead. So be careful. There we go, dry bites. Young snakes are more dangerous. If it's a wet bite, you will know right away whether you actually got venom injected or not, because you will have this excruciatingly painful burning sensation that will travel from that bite up whatever it bit. It'll start spreading, and it's pretty painful. You'll know right away whether you got real venom. A normal snake bite that's dry, it'll get red, it'll hurt a little bit. It might get a small infection, but it's not going to be burning pain. When there's venom, it's burning pain. Different kinds of treatments for that. Please do not cut an X over it and suck the venom out. That's probably hands down the worst thing you could possibly do. And let me explain to you why. You have the skin, yeah? There goes Bruce again, dang it. It's a habit now. When a snake bites, it injects a small pool of venom. Now there are blood vessels in here that will start to slowly carry that away. But usually it goes through your skin into your fat layer and or a muscle layer, and it kind of sits there and doesn't go anywhere real fast. It gets slowly absorbed. If you take a knife and you cut into that, now you have exposed every single blood vessel along that pocket of venom to absorb venom. And it will spread through this and travel really fast. You're actually making it worse by cutting it and trying to suck it out, because you're not going to suck it back out. It's just not going to happen. There are a few snake bite kits that have a suction device. Most of them don't work. I think there was 1 or 2 that was showed to be about 30% effective, but that still means that 70% of the venom is still in you. So what do you do with a snake bite?
Remain calm, rest if possible, and let your body absorb it as slowly as possible.
Yep, remain calm. The Indians discovered centuries ago that they could treat snake bites with charcoal. Okay, same thing with spider bites. First of all, if you've got a stinger bite, remove the stinger. And then apply what's called a drawing poultice. This is a type of herbal treatment where you take a bunch of herbs and clay and different things and you put it on it, and it will actually pull the venom back out of your skin through the same hole that the snake used to put it into it. Much better than the suction device does. In those poultices for spiders and scorpions, you want to put baking soda, because the high alkaline content of the baking soda actually deactivates the venom in both of them, because they're both arachnids, and charcoal to absorb all those toxins. With snake bites, you put charcoal on it. Just regular old Kingford briquettes will work just fine.
You crush them up.
Crush them up, mix them with a little bit of water, stick it on there, wrap it in saran wrap.
Where you can buy it.
Activated charcoal. Activated charcoal just means it has charcoal that's been sprayed up in the air so that it's honeycomb shaped like foam instead of chunks like charcoal, but it's all going to work about the same.
So with the baking soda and charcoal, when you just make a paste out of it?
Make a paste out of it with whatever you want to use, honey, water, whatever you want to use is fine. Put it on there and just wrap it in saran wrap. The saran wrap is nice because it lets you, it's a water barrier, keeps it from leaking all over the place. But they've shown that there's been a lot of research actually done on these treatments, that the charcoal on a snake bite actually really does work. And then echinacea essential oil, it's an immune stimulant. It helps your body to break down the snake venom. And there we go, basic contents of your first aid kit. So right now you've got the basic stuff for both medical and trauma-related stuff. This is pretty much all I would really recommend that you have in your first aid kit at this point. Saran wrap, some sort of antibiotic ointment, a multi-tool with a knife that has a knife and a saw on it, a Leatherman, a Gerber, an SOG, something that's got both a knife and a saw. A Mylar emergency blanket, some way to make heat, okay? Make fire, a lighter, tinder, a blast match, ferrocium rods, matches, windlass torches. I don't care what you've got, but some way to make fire and have at least 2 ways to do it, because I guarantee you one of them is not going to work reliably. Some sort of string, cordage, whether it's paracord or fishing line or bank line or just regular nylon string from the hardware department, something to tie stuff with. Panty liners. They make some of the very best bleeding control bandages ever. That's what they're designed to do, is to absorb and control bleeding. And they do a great job of it. And they're sticky on one side. So remember that Israeli bandage we talked about? That's, $4 or $6 or so. Well, if you have saran wrap and a panty liner, guess what you have now?
An Israeli bandage.
An Israeli bandage. And this keeps it from moving around as you wrap it with saran wrap. I don't know who thought of it as a panty liner, but this is a genius medical device. Okay? So guys, don't be embarrassed going to the store and buying tampons and panty liners. They make really thick ones, maxi pads, same thing. They're about 1 inch thick and sticky on one side. Stick them to your saran wrap. Stick them on anything. It works great for holding them in place. Super, super brilliant device for your first aid kit. And tampons, perfect for bullet holes. They slide right in. And when they get blood under, they expand and fill the hole. And they got a string for easy removal. It just doesn't get any better. Headlamps. I recommend headlamps over flashlights because in order to use a flashlight, what do you have to do?
Hold it in your mouth.
Hold it in your mouth if you want to use both your hands. And then you're going slurking your slobber around it. Just get a headlamp. Yes, sir?
So, the nature of a first aid kit, it sits for a long period of time before you actually use it. So how do you guarantee that the headlamp's going to work?
I brought mine. Mine takes, I'll have to find it here in a second. Mine takes AA and AAA batteries. And so in my first aid kits, that's not even true. That's my nice one. I went to Walmart and I bought the cheap dollar ones they have sitting on the shelf back in the sporting goods that are blue and pink and gray. They have that little plastic tab that separates the battery from the contacts. And I didn't take the plastic tab off. And I throw about 4 of those in my first aid kits in my backpacks.
Even if you store the battery separate from the light, the battery still go bad over time.
Eventually. So what should you do at least once a year? Replace it. They only cost $1. It's not that expensive. I do mine when I do my taxes. So I know that every year when I do my taxes, I go through all my first aid kits and I check all the supplies in them. And my bug out bags, the same thing. I do the same thing every year. I go through it and I check expiration dates. I replace batteries, whether they're good or bad. I've got a special spot where I put batteries that should be good but are old. And I've got spots where I have brand new batteries. It just depends on how you want to do it. Nothing is going to be perfect. There's not a perfect way to do it. But your best bet is to get some sort of headlamp that you can replace the batteries in, whether it's the CR123s or the little flat button ones. Those are the those aren't the CR123s.
CR1.
Or little for flashlights. Yeah, whatever they are. The same thing for your red dot scopes and stuff like that. The button cells. Or I like AA's and AAA headlamps. I recommend those because it's easy to get rechargeable batteries in those.
So at least the best rechargeable batteries I've come upon are made by Panasonic. Any of the batteries. They say they only lose like 7% charge per year. That'd be a good one to have in your.
Absolutely. Whatever works for you works for you. And I mean, there's people who use the, the 18560 lithium batteries, the green ones that you can get. Whatever type of headlamp you decide you want to get, I recommend you get a headlamp because then it's on your forehead and wherever you turn your head, you're going to have light. And usually that's where you're looking as well, and it frees your hands up. So however you manage to do it, do it. But that's about it. Okay, any questions, guys?
You know the next date for our class, next class?
It's going to be the last Saturday of each month.